Stan, again, thank you so much, and for this really important series of projects that you've brought together. This is the first time, I would think, where all the different mediums and disciplines that you've worked on have been brought together in one context. Can you talk a little bit about, for you, what this represents? If this marks a shift or this marks an expansion of the things that you've already worked on?
Well, I've worked for a very long time in photographic media, still photographs as well as moving pictures. I've always had an ambition to work in theater or working with live performances, and this was really the first opportunity to make that happen. As I mentioned yesterday, years ago, I pitched an idea for a production of Alban Berg's Lulu to Okwui when he was doing Documenta 11, but we found out how much it was going to would cost to do an opera with a 110-piece orchestra. We thought about doing something else. Some of those ideas from that opera were poached and used in Helen Lawrence, but it does go back to my early interest in an artist named, or a writer named Samuel Beckett, who was well known as a creator of theater, but had been a big influence on my thinking about literary ideas, artistic ideas, as well as sort of certain core philosophical concepts that I derived from his work. That's kind of a foundational thing as opposed to being kind of a end game as he's usually thought of being. Early on, when I began producing art, I had this notion that I would make work based in a medium that was peculiar to the idea I was trying to address. The first time I was doing this was the first film I made was in a way a commentary on the relation between filmmaking and cinema and literature, a work called Overture, combining Edison film reels with some text derived from Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time. Another work I made shortly after that called Television Spots, which was my attempt to somehow address the effects of television advertising on its audiences by making counterfeit ads that were broadcast on commercial TV. I've since then kind of got stuck in the media of photography and film, so it's kind of a wonderful moment to be able to branch out into things such as the app Circa 1948, which we produced or just released about a month ago, as well as the play Helen Lawrence, which you can see here at the Kammerspiele.
And Johan, for you, what was the central impetus for wanting to present Helen Lawrence?
For me, it was these two realities. For me, it was a completely other way of playing than the Europeans do. And especially the two realities struck me because he's not only a very good photographer, but also a fucking good director.
It's all right.
Yes, because if you look at the photos, I just asked Stan, all is mise en scène. And it looks as every actor, there are 30 or 40 or whatever, every actor is thinking of something else. Anyway, that's the suggestion. Yeah, it's a fantastic director.
So what do Europeans do, exactly?
Sorry?
What exactly do European actors do?
European actors have an other schooling. I mean, the school of the American and Canadian actors is more or less comes out of Lee Strasberg. And European actors come out Stanislavski and go then to Grotowski. That's another way of playing. I can declare it so. These actors are very concentrated on what they have to do, but a European actor plays more like that. The swords are more or less concentrating on I have to play on the moment. And every sword, if I play on the moment, is permitted. So that's the difference.
Yeah.
If it's of course you can talk about it 1 hour, but
Well, I think we don't quite have 1 hour, but we have an opportunity later this evening to, see, Helen Lawrence and perhaps to determine whether this theory, being proposed by Johan holds. And I'm very sure that it does, since this is what Johan really, does every single day in the theater. But I think it's interesting to sort of to go back to mise en scène, because in the initial, impetus for the exhibition was the focus on photography. This was what León wanted to really engage with. León, you had believed that Stan's, accomplishments in photography is generally underlooked as a fundamental part of his practice. Talk a little bit about, why you thought that, why you really wanted to focus principally on photography of Stan's.
Ja, erlauben Sie mir, dass ich in Deutsch spreche. Ich war zunächst überrascht von dem Übergang, von dem Wechsel von der dokumentarischen zur inszenierten Fotografie bei Stan Douglas, der ja unvorbereitet kam. Und es gibt ja andere Künstler der sogenannten Vancouver Art School wie Rodney Graham und Jeff Wall, von denen man das kennt. Und man hat den Eindruck, dass sich Stan Douglas lange fern davon gehalten hat. Und dann sind da plötzlich diese Crowds and Riots, wo Stan Douglas mit gleich in die Vollen geht und unter großem Einsatz von Mitteln, mit professionellen Mitteln der Filmindustrie beispiellose Fotografien schafft. Ich weiß nicht, ob man Abbott Cordova irgendetwas an die Seite stellen kann. Und da werden für mich neue Wege aufgezeigt, die Fotografie vielleicht gehen kann. Es ist nicht nur der Einsatz von Computertechnologie, das Montieren von Bildern, das kann es allein nicht sein, sondern der Versuch mit dem Medium Fotografie, sich mit Geschichte auseinanderzusetzen. Man ist dann aufgrund der Formate gleich bei dem Vergleich oder versucht, das mit der Historienmalerei des 19. Jahrhunderts zu vergleichen. Dieser Vergleich funktioniert natürlich nicht, weil es in der Historienmalerei des 19. Jahrhunderts um die Repräsentation von Geschichte ging. Was Stan Douglas in meinen Augen als Fotograf gelingt, ist, den Betrachter gewissermaßen an die Momente zurückzuversetzen, wo die Geschichte noch flüssig war. Es gibt diesen Ausdruck vergangene Zukunft, der ist hier relevant.
Well, I don't know if you have any response, Stan. One of the central, things about going to Vancouver, to visit artists, that there are, in a sense, a number of artists who are dominant in the landscape. Stan is one. Jeff Wall is another. Rodney Graham is another, and maybe we can say, Roy Arden when it comes to photographic, practice, and I don't know, maybe a few other people. But it seems to me that, maybe this could, when we look at photographic practice from Vancouver, there may be something that one can identify as a Vancouver school. Is there a Vancouver school in your thinking?
No.
I knew you would say that. I knew you would say that. But Stan, what is very interesting is that your work has been so much identified with the moving image. Even though that for 30 years or so, you've really been engaged with photography. And over the last 5 years or 6 years, this is the first film that you've made. Why do you think that people focus so much on your projected images and less on your photography?
I guess there's a fundamental difference between a still image and a moving image. A moving image can provide context for itself. Each image and succession of images, tells you in their chronology what the other one is supposed to mean by giving their context. So there's an amount of complexity you can have with a moving picture that you can't really have with a photograph. Photographs are always kind of inadequate. They're always partial. They often need some kind of commentary. And we knew this from the very beginning, from the first Krakauer essay on photography, where it's not a complete medium, because there's always ancillary information that's required in order to parse it. But nevertheless, I've tried to make photographs in the past that do provide a context for themselves by being in groups of photographs. Individual images always have their sort of concern, but by being in the context of the group, that would produce some kind of sense of a larger story. But I mean, people would often mistake or often call my photographs location photographs, because I would often make a film work in the same place where I made the photographic work, but I would usually try to make the work a discrete project, somehow understanding something peculiar about the situation. Repurposed places in Cuba and Havana, sort of the psychogeography of the city of Detroit, which were very distinct from the actual films I would make in those locations. In a way, well, in 2008, it was the first time I took a photograph of people. Aside from the portraits of Clat Sasson, I'd almost avoided that purposely, because I felt having a person in a photograph begins to start to, theatricalize and sort of psychologize the scene, where you are more interested in the psychological dynamic of that person, that character, than you are in the situation. Where I was more concerned about the multivalent possibilities of a image as a scene for possible action, as opposed to focusing it down to one action. But when I made that mural for Crowds and Riots, for the Abbott and Cordova image, I realized I really enjoyed working with actors in that way, having brought the skills I learned from making motion pictures to making still photographs. And since I had always got, my photographs had sort of gotten the less attention than my video, I decided I'm going to concentrate on doing photographs for a large period of time, for 5 years. And it's been great to be able to put all these things together in this exhibition.
And I suppose, Johan, this is precisely what you were really very interested in, the directorial approach that you saw in some of these recent photographs, because the photographs are composed almost as the way you make a film. So in a sense, they are photographic, but they are not photographs in that. So they are cinematic in the kind of conventions that you've used, the casting, the costumes and the staging. So, Johan, do you see, what is for you the relationship between these two, mediums in theater? Because one of the things we were talking about last night, when you have a projected image and you have live actors, sometimes one tend to dominate the other.
If I could just say something. When you do film or photographs like this, there's a certain way in which you can actually trick the actors into giving what you want. You don't necessarily have to get them to understand the context of what they're doing in order to look the way you need them to look for a particular scene. There's different ways of approaching it. Doing it. At a certain point, you get frustrated. You can lie to an actor and performer and get what you need in terms of an image out of it. But you can't do this in theater. You can't lie to an actor who has to do the thing night after night. And at a certain point, they realize that what you've told, the instruction you've given them, makes no sense. It's hard for them to work with those moments. I couldn't have done this play without the help of my associate director, Sarah Stanley, who, when we began the process, said, Stan, you're going to go through a very interesting progression here. At the beginning, the first performance will be amazing, really fresh, and then it gets really bad for about 3 weeks as they get more and more self-conscious of what they're doing, and it takes a while to get back to that sort of sense of spontaneity they had at the beginning, once they've internalized all that. And I couldn't have done it without Sarah, I just want to say.
And has that to do with motivation, or how do you? Because I'm very curious, of course. How do you come back again then on the point that you say, well, now it's like it should be for me?
Where it becomes instinctual to a certain degree, where it becomes intuitive. I find the same way when I do research for projects. There's a long time when I'm just sort of sludging through all the details and sort of minutiae to understand a period or an era or a place. And there's a certain point where I don't have to think about it, and I know what's right. This is how it would look then in Angola in 1974. I don't have to look for an example because I just know it.
Yeah.
And I think the actor goes through the same process.
Yeah.
And Leon, in setting up the sequence of the exhibition, what came first for you?
In der Auseinandersetzung mit den Arbeiten bin ich irgendwann auf den Punkt gekommen, dass es interessant sein könnte, eine recht bekannte Serie, die auch vor allem in Nordamerika schon gezeigt wurde, Crowds and Riots, worüber wir schon gesprochen haben, mit der Serie Interiors in einem Raum zusammen auszustellen. Die Interiors sind die einzigen Dokumentarfotografien in der Ausstellung. Bei Crowds and Riots 4 Fotografien und gegenüber diese 4 etwa formatgleichen Interiors, die kaum ausgestellt wurden und wovon das letzte Bild auch erst vor einem Jahr abgezogen wurde. Das Negativ bestand schon. Die Interiors sind ein Jahr nach Crowds and Riots entstanden. Und diese Gegenüberstellung ist, glaube ich, sehr interessant. In den Crowds and Riots geht es offenkundig um den Menschen in der Masse. Und das ist ganz neu bei Stan Douglas und überhaupt sehr selten in der Fotografie, dass Menschenansammlungen gezeigt werden. Ich würde auch Stan gleich dazu gerne etwas fragen, wenn ich darf. Und sozusagen im Hintergrund steht die Frage nach dem Kollektiv, das von einem Willen gelenkt wird, oder die Staatsmacht, die im Hintergrund wirkt. Bei den Interiors, die sind menschenleer, aber man sieht Anhäufungen, geordnete Zustände von Gegenständen. Und man spürt, dass auch hier einzelne Individuen in dem Fall ordnend gewirkt haben. Also aus meiner Sicht werden hier erstmals Intentionen thematisch. Und das finde ich sehr aufregend, ja, dass das in die Fotografie hineinkommt. Intentionen, ja, das kennt man aus Romanen oder vom Theater, aber nicht von der Fotografie. Und am I allowed to ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So,
It's a conversation.
Stan, so what was the impulse for Crowds and Riots? Why photographing? So at a time when the multitudo is discussed in political philosophy, has it something to do with a swarm intelligence or not?
Not exactly a swarm intelligence, but the primary thing was the Abbott and Cordova photograph, which I was commissioned to make as a mural. It's actually a 13-meter wide mural that's embedded into a glass. It's a wall of an atrium in a complex in Vancouver. And that intersection that you see in the photograph is right behind where that mural is. It's a neighborhood that's kind of had been very derelict, so it's going through a process of potential gentrification now, but it's still this confluence of the sort of subaltern, sort of lumpen proletariat types who live there, as well as the middle class who are moving into the area now. So this is something that the neighborhood became that way, a place where police kind of contained drug use, prostitution, and actually the insane. A lot of asylums were closed in Vancouver, or halfway houses were closed around Vancouver, and many of the people gravitated toward this downtown east side neighborhood, and the police would kind of like let anything happen there. If you could do, my studios are, look at my back window, I see people shooting up, doing coke, having sex in the alley. If I photographed it, you wouldn't believe it. It's just like so insane. But this neighborhood is in a period of transition, but it became the way it was as a place that's kind of like a no-go zone because of that riot, this police riot which took place in 1971. So as a way of, instead of making a monument of some guy on a horse or something decorative, I wanted to make an image that was a problem and that it was somehow tied to this neighborhood, and that's what I decided to do. It was a very expensive picture to make because we actually built everything. It was all in a parking lot. We constructed the facade, poured the curbs, got the lamp standards, actually cast the signs because they used to be made out of cast metal back then. It cost about $500,000 to make that picture. So in order to, because I hadn't photographed people very much, I thought I should do something to work up to that. So the other photographs, I'm solving technical problems in order to get to that final image, which were done over a period of a week or so. So the Hastings Park image was a sort of process of trying to figure out how do I direct a crowd? How can I direct people, a group of people simultaneously? And this was often using a trick where I would tell them that there was the PA holding a tennis ball was a horse, and you're all cheering your horse as it goes across the bottom of the stage. But actually, I photographed them in between takes, where they actually were waiting for something to happen, and that's the condition you see in the picture. With the Ballantine Pier photograph with the horses, I had to figure out how to photograph a horse in motion. How do you make a photograph of a horse so it doesn't look like it's flying, doesn't look like it's falling, looks like it's moving in a certain way? And what exposure do I need? These are technical challenges I had to figure out at the same time. But at the same time, thematically, I wanted to look at a history with the example of Vancouver, and often I use Vancouver as local conditions of local examples of global conditions, of different processes of the formations of crowds. In the first image, the free speech demonstration, it's an image of Wobblies, who are like IWW left-wing radicals trying to organize unemployed labor at a time when the city declared free speech in the city illegal because they knew they were trying to do this. So in a way, this is exterior ancients trying to form a body out of sort of an unformed group of people. In the case of the Ballantine Pier, this is at a moment when the longshoremen were locked out of work, and scab laborers were brought in, and then 4 kinds of police force were used to sort of keep the laborers away from the scab laborers. So in a way, this group has formed their own body, and their I guess legitimacy is being questioned by the police force. In the Hastings Park image, there's a group of people who become a group without their knowing. They become, consumers. In this case, consumers of luck, of game of chance. In the final one, we have an image of these hippies who are being, in a way, identified as a group by the police and policed and trying to clear the streets. You'll notice there's other types of people, old folks, like the old resource-based laborers who live in the area, or the middle-class restaurant goers who are also there. Will watch the whole scene like a street theater or something, which is kind of what would happen on the day, because they weren't identified as hippies. They were not thought of being a threat. So the whole series, in effect, became a commentary on the formations of crowds by themselves or by exterior forces in different ways. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Well, Stan, I want us to talk a little bit about the new film, Luanda, Kinshasa. And I was particularly struck when you mentioned yesterday the way the film was actually made. That though you're watching it is so completely seamless that it's actually a montage. How were you able to achieve that?
It was shot over two days. One day we shot one side of the space, which was the bed tracks, the rhythm instruments. So that would be drums, bass, rhythm guitar, tablas. Wait, I'm missing something. Drums, bass, rhythm guitar, tablas. Congas, thank you. That's all on one side of the space. These form the bed tracks, what we're going to use. So we work over the period of a day to sort of find the right kind of sound. That was trying to find a synthetic thing that Miles Davis was doing in that period, where he was bringing in Indian classical instruments to work with his hybrids of funk and jazz, and I wanted to bring in other aspects of Afrobeat, which was popular at that time. Manu Dibango's Soul Makossa was a big hit in the disco underground in 1974. So this is something that could have been possible, but actually never did happen. So I wanted to make that happen. Anyway, once we found the right vibe for the bed tracks, the next day we played them back to the other group of musicians, which was the Moog player, the lead guitarist, the Rhodes player, and the saxophone player. And
Keyboard.
and keyboard players. The Rhodes player. So these are everything's sort of locked to a very discrete time. Our tempo was 100 beats per minute. 100 beats per minute, which was given as a click track to the drummer. So she's always used our metronome. 100 beats per minute works out to 2 seconds and 12 frames in video terms. So I knew that if I could cut out that many, if I take out that many amounts of music, I'm cutting out a musical unit of the video. So basically, what I had to do was to arrange it as I was editing, because I couldn't edit until it was arranged, and it couldn't be arranged until it was edited, because you have to be able to hear what you're seeing on screen. So if that doesn't make musical sense, you can't have it there. So it was fairly straightforward for the first six tracks we made. There's 11 tracks in all, but the last 4, where we began mixing keys, I had to rely on the expertise of our musical producer, Scott Harding, who was able to sort of give me a good sense of what went together musically, trimming some stuff out, and then I just did the final trims. I was doing the video editing. So it took about 3 months in the end to edit the thing, but the music was so good, it was a pleasure.
Perhaps it's a question to Stan. Is this a new approach to describe to map the world with trying to describe what is happening at the same time on different spots?
I guess the thing is, now we have technological means for very quick communication, which is an acceleration of what happened when we had telephony, telegraph, that kind of thing. Previously, to have communication of that sort, you had to travel from one place to another to understand what this place was or that place was. But now these can be transmitted to a certain degree. The idea of Disco Angola is that there could have been one person, perhaps a photographer, who witnessed both these things at the same time. Somebody working as a photojournalist in Angola but living in New York City could see these things happen simultaneously, indicating sort of, and then seeing parallels between the two. So this kind of intercultural synthesis is something that became possible because of the technology of travel, and then to us today it becomes sort of second nature given the internet, etc. And then, of course, Luanda Kinshasa is a further elaboration of the idea of synthesis as well, a very kind of utopian space where, imagining a music which is the summation of multiple kinds of music. It's trying to, in a way, music is an example of how people can endure time together, and people do that in different ways. So it's trying to imagine different ways of coexisting together in the world into one work, which is kind of that utopian impetus we heard with the synthetic musics that appeared in the 1970s, which I was very interested in revisiting. So these various global points of contact are very much the concern of that work. And just one more thing, and the other side of it is the mid-century studio very much relates to Helen Lawrence, in as much as the same period. And actually, in fact, that project was stalled for a while, and to sort of utilize all the research I'd done on the era, I produced that series of photographs. But additionally, there's the app, which is sort of makes this my first multi-platform work, which there's the mobile app, there's the play, and photography.
There's another work in the exhibition. If you go up, the Malabar people, tell us a bit about this series. Is it related to? Yeah. This is an example of the 16 Malabar portraits.
Yeah. So the Malabar people, the source research was a thesis written by my uncle, who was a sociologist, who came to Vancouver from the Caribbean in the 1950s, the mid-1950s, to get his PhD in sociology. And he wrote an essay called The Social System of a Downtown Bar, which was just talking about this bar he used to go. But it's kind of curious that this bar was in the downtown east side, the same neighborhood where Crowds and Riots is set, or the Abbott Conservative is set. It was always a place where the non-whites would go. There's this kind of sense, the idea of white in North America is quite peculiar, where it kind of expands over time. Like at that time, Italians weren't really white, Jews were certainly not white, but now by this point, they're kind of white now. Probably next people to be white would be the Latinos, but that's going to take a little while. But anyway, at this point, it was the place where the non-whites would hang out in these bars. So you'd have the South Asians, the Asians, sometimes, the blacks, often these immigrants, because at this point in the 50s, a lot of people from different parts of the British Empire began moving around. This is why you had the blacks and South Asians in Vancouver, as well as Italians and Jews you'd often find in these bars. So and natives also. So we talk about the different hierarchies of the people who were both working and sort of visiting these bars, who in a way were the same group of people, just assuming different roles. So this is where the mid-century studio's conceit is based on the idea that there's a fictional photographer who goes through the post-war period learning his craft, and as he becomes a better photographer, the works become less and less documentary and more social commentary. This is in a way his final sort of magnum opus, where he decides to make a little sociological study of this bar he knows about, taking the simplest means he could do to get a period look to the photographs, 2 lights left and right, bang bang, and to get those shots. And that's Melbourne people.
And Johan, what will people see in your theater? How was this collaboration with the actors? How did that work? And for Helen Lawrence?
With the actors?
Yeah.
With the American actors, with the Canadian
with
actors?
The Canadian actors,
yeah.
Doing their Canadian-American thing.
Yeah.
in a non-European way.
I only saw the result, but what is very interesting of the performance, probably because I'm always talking about these 2 realities, and I'm thinking about it now. What you see is the preparation and the result. And that I like very much. So you see, for me, you see the back, the front of people, but also seeing the front of people. So you also see the back of people, the preparation, the going through before the result is there, and. I had a little talk with these actors. They're fantastic in this show, and it's so beautiful that you have black actors on stage and white actors on stage, and that you feel that it comes out of another culture. If you go on the street in Munich, you don't see so much blacks. In Amsterdam, yes. In Brussels also. But in Canada, in Vancouver, I think, like you are talking also, there are, of course, a lot. And it's very logical in this performance. So I said it also yesterday. So in the end, in 10 years, you will have in the Kammerspiele also, I think, 10 or 20 black actors, and that's fantastic, of course.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much, Stan. Again, for a very, very, incredible, series of works that again pushes the context of medium specificity to another level, and León for again a fantastic exhibition, and Johan for the wonderful collaboration. And so the exhibition opens now, and then at 7 o'clock at the Kammerspiele will be Helen Lawrence. Thank you again so much. Stan.